Guy Fawkes.
It's the 15th of June, 1215. This is King John of England, and he's been cornered by all of these angry barons.
I'm so angry.
Me too.
These barons are angry because they are fed up with King John's unfair, but hold on, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's back up. Whoa, hey, that's a bit too far. That's more like it. Here's medieval England. And in medieval England, society was organized under the feudal system. At the bottom were the peasants. They farmed land that they had rented from the barons.
I hate rent. Got no money.
The barons were wealthy because they'd done a favor for the king, who'd given them land as a reward. At the top was the king. He owned everything in the kingdom and could do as he pleased, including making people pay tax.
I hate
It's so unfair.
A king's power was based on the belief, supported by the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury, that God himself had made the king the king. A king's power also depended on the size of his empire. Anyone understood this? It was Henry Plantagenet. He set out to make a massive empire. He inherited some land in France, but he wanted more. The province of Aquitaine in the southwest of France belonged to Eleanor.
Behind every good king is a lady with a lot of land.
When Henry married her, his domain grew by leaps and bounds. And then, when he became King of England, his empire grew again. So did his family. Henry and Eleanor had 8 children: William, Henry, Matilda, Richard, Geoffrey, Eleanor, John, and the final one was John. Poor John. As the youngest son, it was unlikely that he'd ever be king. But fate has a way of changing everything. When Henry II died, Richard became King of England. Richard spent barely any time in England. He was off fighting the Crusades or battling rebels in France. In 1199, while trying to take a castle in Charloux, Richard was wounded and died. So despite the odds,
Yippee, I'm king.
John was crowned King of England.
Hello, peasants.
Not only did John inherit a really big crown, he also inherited a lot of worries. Number 1, he needed to expand and protect his father's empire. Number 2, King Philip II was a huge threat to John's empire in France. Plus, he wanted to invade England and install his son, Prince Louis, as king. Number 3, Pope Innocent III wanted to appoint Stephen Langton as Archbishop of Canterbury. King John wanted to appoint his own archbishop. So the Pope forbade everyone in England from holding religious ceremonies for 5 years. The argument ended when John got scared that Philip was planning an invasion. John needed the Pope's help to stop Philip's invasion, so he paid a massive tribute. All was forgiven, literally. And Stephen Langton became Archbishop of Canterbury. And finally, John had to worry about the barons. He needed their support.
I've had quite enough of this. The king wants far too much money.
Bitch, pa.
But the barons were fed up. In 15 years, King John had lost almost all of his dad's land in France, and he had treated his barons very badly. In July 1214, he decided to attack Bouvines and lost. That's when the rebel barons started plotting.
The king is hiring an army.
We need to
He's
do
preparing
something.
for a civil war.
Let's meet with him. Let's confront him.
They tried meeting with King John, renouncing their allegiance, even capturing London. But again and again, John ignored them. The rebel barons even considered asking Prince Louis to become king.
Bonjour.
This got King John's attention. And in June 1215, the rebel barons arranged to meet him in neutral territory, Runnymede.
You have no choice.
King John had no choice. He accepted the barons' demands and put his royal seal on the Charter of Liberties. He pretended to go along with it, secretly asked the Pope to do something. Then he waited in Dover for a response. Meanwhile, scribes made copies of the charter and sent them across the kingdom. Rebel barons also took possession of some of John's castles, including Rochester Castle in Kent. In September, a letter arrived from the Pope.
We, on behalf of Almighty God, utterly reject and condemn this settlement. We order that the charter be null and void of all validity forever.
But this did absolutely nothing to change the rebel barons' minds. So John started a rampage across England.
This means war.
First, Rochester. He destroyed Rochester Bridge, then attacked the castle. After 7 weeks, the barons surrendered.
That will show them.
Meanwhile, Louis
Bonjour.
arrived in London. The barons swore allegiance to him. Now the only thing standing between Louis and the throne of England was the head wearing the crown. In October, John hurried towards Lincoln. He started feeling unwell. In his haste, he crossed the Wash before the tide had gone out. His baggage train got stuck in quicksand. All his treasures were lost. By trying so desperately to hold on to the crown of England, he somehow lost it to the sea. John got as far as Newark, broke, alone, and sick with dysentery.
I feel so sick.
King John died. So then John's son Henry became king. He had to be crowned with a plain gold ring.
Hello there, I'm King Henry.
The fact is, the English barons preferred a boy king over a French one.
What? But I thought I was going to be the king.
Au revoir,
Louis. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Especially since they would be in a position to advise him. Still, the country was a mess. So William Marshall, Henry III's main advisor and regent, reissued the Charter of Liberties as a royal charter to assure rebel barons that the new king would keep their demands.
We've removed the really troublesome clauses.
It didn't quite do the trick. So in 1217, William Marshall reissued it for Henry as part of the peace treaty to end the Civil War.
So how did the Charter of Liberties become Magna Carta?
When the charter was reissued in 1217, it had a second part, the Charter of the Forest. The Charter of Liberties was on a bigger sheet of vellum, and so it became the Great Charter. In Latin, that's Magna Carta. And that's what we've all called it ever since. In 1225, Henry III needed to raise taxes,
No new taxes! No new taxes!
which raised a few eyebrows. So to prevent another rebellion, he reissued Magna Carta again.
I issue this Magna Carta of my own free will.
In 1297, Henry's son, Edward I, had the same problem
I need more money to fight the Scots and the Welsh and the French.
and the same solution. This Magna Carta was entered into the statute rolls as English law. which meant that if a king wanted to change it, he had to get it approved by Parliament.
What's the big deal about Magna Carta anyway?
Well, in England, Magna Carta was the first step towards building a fair society where everyone has equal rights and nobody is more powerful than the law. This is the root of our legal system and government. Magna Carta and the English legal system became a model for other countries, including the USA,
Thank you, Magna Carta.
Australia,
Thanks a lot, Magna Carta.
New Zealand,
Cheers, Magna Carta.
Canada,
Thanks, Magna Carta.
and India,
Thanks, Magna Carta.
to name just a few. In fact, if our calculations are correct, 1/4 of the people in the world live in a country where the system of government was inspired by Magna Carta. And Magna Carta has inspired the idea that all humans everywhere deserve equal rights and freedom. After the Second World War, the United Nations decided to do something to protect the rights of everyone on the planet. Eleanor Roosevelt and her team wrote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was approved in December 1948. She described it as
A Magna Carta for all mankind.
after that, countries around the world made their own laws to protect human rights.
Is that where the story ends?
Not by a long shot. Magna Carta was only the first stepping stone on our journey to a fair and just society. Over the past 8 centuries, all sorts of people all over the world have been inspired by Magna Carta to live lives, and make laws, and build countries that celebrate the idea that everyone is equal under the law. It's a remarkable legacy that's been passed on to us. We are all responsible for making our society fairer and more just. We are all responsible for protecting human rights. And now that you know the story of Magna Carta, it's your responsibility too.
Thank you, Magna Carta.